Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me. My name is Vickie Fuller. I am with the Artist in Schools program with the South Dakota Arts Council. And I'm so glad you joined me today to talk about methods of characterization used in literature. Now, whether you're with a class at school, a class via Zoom, or at home, by yourself. I hope that you'll take time to pause the video each time I ask you to and either answer the questions on your own or with a partner or a group of people, just to talk about the different things we're going to be focusing on today. I've been a teacher for well over 30 years, which is hard to imagine since I'm only 29. I'm sure I don't look any older than that. I'm also an actor and a director. Lived in Sioux Falls for most of my life, but have been living in Pennsylvania in the Philadelphia area for the last 9 years. I still come back to South Dakota to work in the school systems. Before we begin today, I want to make sure that you have downloaded and have your handout copies. We have 3 different pages. One's called Oral Interpretation. The next one is Drawing Inferences. And then the last one is called Nasty Dan, which is a poem that we're going to be analyzing a little bit later in the video session today. You notice I started with oral interpretation. I don't know if you're aware of this, but South Dakota has a wonderful opportunity for you once you get into high school, and some middle schools even do oral interpretation competitions. But it's actually a competitive form of acting where you can work on your own or with a partner or with a group, and you go before a judge and you get scored basically, and hopefully if you do really well you make it to the final round and earn some trophies. That's something you want to look into. Oral interpretation is a little bit different from theater in that, you know, when I'm acting on stage, I'm talking to the person right next to me. But if I'm performing with somebody in oral interp, I don't ever actually look at them. I can't. I'm not allowed to. So I look at what's called a focal point on the back wall. So when I'm talking to my character, I'm always going to look at that same focal point and never look at them. When I'm narrating, if I'm not speaking to my character, but I'm speaking as a narrator, then I just look at the audience, looking them in the eye. So a little bit different, because oral interpretation, you don't have to memorize your lines because you have the script right in your hands. You're holding the script the whole time. You don't use costumes, you don't use props. You just have to interpret the language. But what you do use is analyzing the methods of characterization in literature. So let's go to our first handout here, and we're going to just start filling in our oral interpretation handout. You've already written your name down. But when speaking to another character, the performer looks at not the other person, but at a focal point on the back wall. This is for when we are doing oral interpretation as a competition. When narrating, the performer looks at the audience. But no matter if you're doing theater or oral interpretation, you are always drawing inferences. I want you to write down what you think inferences are. Pause the video. Hopefully you or you and your partner or you and your group came up with the idea that inferences are basically educated guesses. We are making an educated guess about what we think is right. And we bring our own experiences into drawing inferences. Different people will come up with different things. But we do want to focus on these first 4 ideas of methods of characterization in literature. The first one is physical appearance. What does the character look like? Basically, are they tall, short, fat, thin? Do they have a disability of some kind? Do they look clean or do they not look so clean? Are they a little bit messy? What kind of facial expressions or actions do they do? What kind of clothes do they wear? Their body language. All right, so So let's be honest. If this is the first time you've seen me, you drew inferences about my character based on how I look, how I come across on the video. Think about it this way. What if I came on this video and the first time you saw me, I had a straw hat on. I was chewing on a piece of straw. I was in overalls, no shirt, just some overalls. And I was talking to you like, we're gonna learn something new today. It's gonna be great. You'd have had a totally different opinion of me. So what we choose to wear, how we choose to do our hair, how we choose to pierce or tattoo ourselves, all of those create messages about who we are. Today I'm going to talk to you about an actual former student I had when I was teaching full-time. This student joined our institution about 3 months into the school year, and we're going to talk about some inferences you have based on what I share about the student. This would be like what you would read in a book and how you would be introduced to his character. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell you about his appearance. He usually wore jeans. They weren't always clean and they had holes in them, and not the fashionable kind of holes, but like holes from wear and tear, and the bottoms were frayed. He wore one of those undershirts that you call wife beater shirts. That's the slang name of them. And then he wore a flannel over it, like a like a hunter's flannel. It wasn't clean and it was open so you could see the t-shirt, the undershirt underneath. He had long hair, not clean, probably been a couple days since he washed it. He wore a headband here tied in the back, and then some grungy shoes. I don't even remember what kind of shoes they were. Now, just based on the information that I gave you in his physical appearance, I want you to answer that first question in section A. Based on how he looks, what type of person do you think he is? Pause the video. Once you come back, I'd like you to share with other people what you think. And it's important to me that I hope this is done in a classroom setting, because everybody has sort of a different opinion at this point. Some people might think he's very poor. Some people might think he's got an attitude and just doesn't care what he looks like. Some people might feel sorry for him, you know. So what type of person do you think he is? It's all based on your own experience. And judging from where you come from in your life, you'll have a different opinion of him, right or wrong. That's just the inference you drew based on his appearance. Now let's move to the second point in our methods of characterization: thoughts, speech, and actions. Okay. So how does the person treat other people? What do they talk about? What's important to them? I don't want to share a lot at this point about my student. I'm going to call him Bob. That's not his real name, but what I am going to do is I'm going to show you how Bob entered my room the first day. Now, keep in mind, this was 3 months into the school year. He had never met me before. This was the first time he was meeting his new teacher for math. That was what I taught. And this was how he entered my room. Where do I sit? Okay. I wish you could have seen the whole body language there, but we are going to go back to our questionnaire. And I want you to answer the 2 sections on B. What does his body language tell you? And judging by the first words he stated, what kind of student do you think he will be? Pause the video now. Now, you couldn't really see all of my body language here, but hopefully you kind of got a negative attitude about his body language. He gave off a very negative attitude when he came in there. Just like, I don't want to be here. I hate life. I hate you. And think about the first words he said to me. If you were meeting your teacher for the first time at a new school, how would you introduce yourself? And all he said to me was, where do I sit? And he said it pretty much like that. So that should tell you a little bit about this person. All right, these are the methods of characterization used in literature. We're pretending I'm telling you a little bit of a story about my former student. Now, how do others feel about him or her? This is the third point. How do others treat him, and what do they say about her? Okay. As a teacher, I was noticing that some kids were drawn to him. They thought he was pretty cool, pretty hot stuff. Other kids really stayed away from him, like he was bad news. They didn't want to deal with him. Myself, how did I feel about him? When he asked, where do I sit? I said, the back of the room will be fine. He made me nervous. I didn't want him in the front of the room drawing attention. I could tell he was going to be an interesting character in the classroom. Actually, he slept a lot in my class. He slept a lot, which was a good day because then he wasn't doing something naughty in class. So I want you to answer part C. Would you want to be his friend? And explain why or why not. Pause the video. I have gotten lots of different responses on part C. Most people say no for various reasons. Maybe you think he's going to get you in trouble. Maybe you just don't like him. But I've had some people that said, yes, I would want to be his friend because they felt like he needed a friend. And I thought that was a pretty awesome thing to say. They're going off of their own experiences and maybe they've been left out. Maybe they have been an outcast and how that made them feel. So they didn't want somebody else to feel that way. I always admire people who say that. But myself, I'd have to be honest and say I wouldn't want to be his friend because he seems like he would get me into trouble. And I don't hang out with people who get me into trouble. Now we're going to talk about narrator's comments. You know, this is a huge thing when you're reading a book. What the narrator can tell you about the person can really change how you feel about that character. So I created some narration. Everything I've told you so far is true from my perspective. This narration is fiction. But I want you to think about, after I'm finished reading, how do you feel about this character? Bob always dreaded the first day at a new school. He despised starting over again. How many more times would they have to move before his mom was sure they were safe? The way the kids looked at him made him aware of how much he had changed the past year. God, had it only been a year? Please fill in part D. Pause the video. All right, that gives a whole new perspective to our character. I want you to think about how you first thought about our character versus your final thoughts about our character, and kind of read through the progression of your thoughts. Every time we gathered new information, we gained a different perspective on this character's life. Okay, this is what a great author will do. They'll start you out with one image of the character and then show you there's a whole nother side to this story, and there's a whole nother side to the reasons why your character is being the way they are. I want you to talk about this in your group, or think about this by yourself. What do you think this person might be doing today? Now, hopefully you pause the video to really give that some thought. I think about this student a lot, and I'm sure teachers do this all the time. You know, students that are challenging for them. I pray for my students, so I always want them to have a good life, and that was 7th grade for this kid. I really hope his life turned out better than he even thought it was going to be. So the next story that we're going to read deals with a lot of narrator comments and how others feel about the character in question. After you read the poem Nasty Dan, I want you to answer the first 4 questions on our page that is marked drawing inferences. Okay, so let me just share my screen here very quickly. You're going to take time alone or with a partner to read the poem Nasty Dan. You can each take line after line if you're reading it with a partner. And then when you're done reading it, you're going to look at 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're going to answer those questions. Please pause the video now. When we read that poem, we get a lot of information about Dan. So we have a lot of good things we can infer, make an educated guess about Dan. First of all, what is the possible age for Dan? Now, you'll get this kind of question on one of your standardized tests. What they really want is the answer 22. Now, I've had some students argue that he could actually be 50, and they're going by their own experiences, because their experiences, if it's a grumpy person, it's probably that grumpy next door neighbor who's a lot older, okay? But because he fell in love with Nasty Pearl and had a kid, we assume he's younger, even though a 50-year-old man could still have a kid. But we assume he's a little younger, so Pearl would like him. How do the people in town feel about Dan? Hopefully you came up with the answer B. Dan is much feared in town. That's really the only one that would be logical on that one. If Dan heard them talking about him this way, he might, now hopefully you all said hit them. Now some people might have said laugh, and there's one line in there that tells us he would never laugh. So, and he'd never laugh. So that line alone takes out answer B. Number 4, what's the most logical description of Dan's appearance? Now, each of these has some interesting parts. Like, I could see him being tall and thin, dressing in jeans and a t-shirt, but he would definitely not walk with a smile on his face, okay? Unless it was an evil smile. Short and muscular, definitely. I could see him being that. But dresses in a suit and tie, not really, not really. Big and burly, yes. Dressed in holey jeans and a plaid shirt, possibly. Shaved head, could be. But let's look at D. He's tall with broad shoulders and long hair, possibility. He walks with a limp, could. And he waves at people he meets, no. He would never wave at people he meets. So the correct answer here is C. Only by elimination do I get to C. Now, you may have had a total different picture of who you thought Nasty Dan looked like. Maybe somebody from your past came to mind. And maybe there were bits and pieces like I saw from each of those that actually clarified Nasty Dan. Those are the inferences we're drawing. We were never given a definite picture of him. So we were drawing inferences and making that educated guess. All right. You know, the interesting thing about this poem is Dan only says one line in the poem. And that line is, I don't like you at all. That's the only time Dan speaks. So my question to you is, who's actually telling this story? Now, as an actor, that becomes my challenge. You see, I have to draw inferences to create a believable character that might actually tell this story. Now, maybe I want to be a rapper dude because I like to play rapper dudes. Nasty Dan was a nasty man. Okay, the problem with that is this during a time when there were actually rappers? Now we have to go back to using our methods of characterization, and we have to analyze this poem to decide, when did this actually occur? Was it in our day and age? Was it in the 1990s? Was it in the 1800s? So I want you to pause the video and I want you to talk with somebody about when you think this story actually took place. Now, I hope you put some answers on the board about when you thought this took place. Because there is a definite time period that you should have come down to. This story has a few key elements in it. I'm going to pull up our thing here. First thing is his name, Nasty Dan. This was a time when they would put an adjective in front of a first name. Back in the day, they used to call people like Wild Bill Hickok or Calamity Jane. That was back in the Wild West. Okay? During the Wild West, they always put that adjective in front of people's name. Slippery Steve, you know, whatever. The other cue that I'm getting here is he never took a bath. Now, do you take baths? Some people do. Or do you take showers? I know that nowadays I take a shower most of the time. But this was back in a time when they didn't have showers. They only had baths. Okay? Those things are sticking out to me as inferences I can draw from this. Another thing is how they're speaking. I heard tell that he never took a bath. Now, do we speak like that nowadays? Not really. He'd try real good. He'd try real good to make things go wrong. That's kind of a backwards way of speaking as well. So there again, that relates to my time period of the Wild West. I'm not going to give you an actual year for that time period, but know that we are somewhere in the Wild West. Now, we have to think about what kind of characters lived in the Wild West that might be telling this story. I want you to pause the video and just brainstorm at least three different characters. Okay, hopefully you put these characters on the board. Now, I know that, you know, definitely we had parents back then. We also had children back then. So this could be a child speaking. We had cowboys and cowgirls back then. So you could be a cowboy or a cowgirl. We had townspeople. And in the town, you know, think about the different things that you might have done in the town. Maybe you were the sheriff. Maybe you owned the local bar, or you were a banker, Or maybe you were a seamstress and you made clothes for people. Maybe you were the candle maker. We got to think about what kind of characters were in the town. One of my favorites would have been the saloon girls. They're the naughty girls, right? I kind of like spicy people. We might be the old coot that sits out on the rocking chair and just rocks back and forth talking about this nasty Dan. Okay, so lots of different people to choose from, and maybe you came up with even more than these. So for your assignment tonight, now as an actor, I would fill out a character analysis of my person. Okay, this is a really short character analysis. I want you to create a character for the narrator in the story. Who do you think is telling this story? Okay, and you're going to draw inferences about that character based on the things that they say. But you know, sometimes when I create a character, I don't get a lot of information about that character. The author spent more time on different characters, and my character is smaller, and I have to build that character from nothing. So that's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to build what we call a backstory for your character. Because down here, first of all, you're going to tell me how old your character is. Is it male or female? And I want an interesting name, you know, try to get that adjective in front of the name and make that person, you know, tell me about who they are based on their name. Tell me about the body structure. Is there something interesting about how they look? What kind of clothes are they wearing? Now, keep in mind, we're back in the Wild West, so be careful about what you say. And do they have certain body language? You know, everybody has body language. You have body language. How you sit in a chair is body language. Think about habits that you have. You know, maybe you sit there and you twirl your hair all the time, and that tells me something about you. Or maybe you're constantly fixing your hair, you know. That's body language. So think about like a habit, an unconscious mannerism that maybe that person has that'll make them more interesting. Your narrator doesn't like Dan, obviously, so you need to create an event. And I want to know specifically, notice I said be specific, what happened that makes you not like Dan? And I want you to get creative. Did he do something to you? Did he do something to a friend of yours, to your family? And what did he do and when and how did that make you feel? Now, these are very important down here. I want you to write 3 adjectives that other people in town would use to describe your, oh, missing a word, your character. That other people in town would use to describe you, the narrator. Okay, now preferably these adjectives are words that you can become. Okay, so sassy, you can become sassy in your delivery of your character. You can become shy. It's really hard to become red hair or blonde, you know. So think about it in terms of that. What kind of words can I, descriptive words can I get about my character that I can actually portray as an actor? This could be a nice little thing that your teacher could take as a grade for you on methods of characterization in literature. If I were to come to your school, we would practice on becoming this character in our body and in our voice, and by the end of the week, we'd be doing a performance. I hope I get to see you someday in real life, and I thank you for your time today. I hope you enjoyed what we talked about, and don't forget about those 4 methods of characterization in literature. Have a great day, everyone.